received certain memoranda through letters and by email and online or otherwise. So the total number of people, institutions, and whatever consulted were not more than 500 across the country. This is a country of over 47 million people we are talking about. So when you consult 500 institutions and individuals in a country of 47 million, clearly that's not representative enough. And when you undertake validation in only 7 regions, not counties, 7 regions, and in these regions, they spent less than a day, we see how many groups, many people were marginalized. Clearly, there was no grassroots effect on this validation. The participation was at a very high level, and therefore, I think not very, again, representative of the people's voice. And I believe that's why there's a lot of conversation around, can we input into the document now that it has been released? And I think the prayer across the board should be some sort of consensus development around this. I think the intolerance being shown to people with divergent groups or people who want to input into it will not be good for our country. Looking at one of the issues that BBI set out to respond to were issues of cohesion and issues of inclusivity. So just standing by the principles that BBI was interrogating, I think that the receiving of comments on this should also bear around those principles. So those are some of the things we will be looking at to see what they say and how they impact us as political parties. As we do this, let's ask ourselves, do the proposals answer the questions they set out to answer? Do they respond to the ills that were identified? Are they the magic bullet we've been waiting for as a country to be able to achieve what we're looking at? So let's think around them and see whether they answer to us or whether they create more problems for the country. The other thing we need to be asking ourselves is, do we need a referendum? And if we do, what kind of referendum do we need? I think those are questions parties should be asking themselves as we go forward. So the report is structured in a manner that it has administrative proposals, it has policy proposals, it has legislative proposals, and it has constitutional amendment proposals. All those are in one document, making it a very hard and an untidy document to read, but something we can still do. If you look at the administrative proposals relating to political parties, one of the first proposals, can you share the slides, please? Tracy, can you share the slides? Okay, I'll continue as they try to share. Oh, thank you, Isaac. Okay, so the first proposal is to strengthen the office of the Registrar of Political Parties. And one of the things they ask for is the appointment of a substantive registrar, which has been done. Then they talk about implementation of the Political Parties Code of Conduct, the Political Parties Act and Regulations, the Elections Act and Regulations. You see, this is talking of implementation. So it's not like there's no law, there's no regulation in space. It's just a matter of the implementation, the goodwill to implement, which I think is something that doesn't need to be put in a document. These people employed should just act. They talk about devolving political parties to have strong country-based branches, so that this expects that a party like yours, Kenya National Congress, is expected to have very, very strong branches in the counties so that you're able to have effect and presence in those places. There's a proposal that we must go into the next election with a clean slate. That means we need to change the IEBC commissioners and come up with new commissioners before the next election. I think that's very interesting because we seem to be doing this at every election. So I think the life of commissioners at IEBC are always very threatened. You work knowing that come the next election, no one will want you in office. The question then we should be asking ourselves, is the problem the individuals appointed, or is the problem the electoral system? What should we be changing every year? I think it's maybe the hardware and not the software. And then it proposes that IEB staff should work on 3-year contracts renewable only once. so that one can work only a maximum of 6 years. That's a proposal in the document. And then it provides that returning officers should be hired through a transparent process, just the way we hire commissioners for our various commissions. It talks of returning officers only working in one election, overseeing only one election, and being hired on a part-time basis. Yeah, so that's there. And then it talks of the current senior officers of the IEBC being vetted to determine their suitability. And then it also provides that the commission should reflect the face of Kenya. And you can see the thread running here is like there's a lot of mistrust against the commission, not just the commissioners, but the senior officers, the staff. Everybody needs to be vetted. Everybody wants to have a face in the commission. I think we really need to have serious and deep conversations about this commission so that it's protected and it's allowed to do its work in progressive elections. Then it talks about reforming the electoral system to ensure it's simple, accurate, verifiable, secure, accountable, and transparent. Now, this would look like a very good proposal and something new, but the sad bit is these exact words are in our constitution. These are the parameters that our constitution sets for an electoral system. So if it is being put here, it is an admission that our current electoral system does not meet the parameters and the conditions set in the constitution. And probably that's why we have a problem. And that's why I'm saying what we need to address is the electoral system and not the staff. If the system can reach where it needs to be, I think we will be good to go. But maybe the staff are the impediment to having an electoral system that meets these standards. But I think Kenyans should be asking questions that what kind of system then do we have if the BBI report is saying we need to reform to reach here? So where are we at? Those are questions we need to ask ourselves. So those are the administrative proposals. We then move to the proposed constitutional amendments within the BBI steering committee report. And the first one we're going to look at are amendments affecting IEBC. Now, when it comes to the IEBC, the proposal is that the commission should have 7 commissioners, 7 members, and out of the 7, 4 are supposed to be from parliamentary political parties. I stress the word parliamentary political parties. So parties that are not represented in parliament will not have an opportunity to ever take up any of these positions. And then that makes you question yourself. Will these other parties have a fair opportunity of having their issues tackled or considered by the IEBC? Those are questions you will talk to me about at the end of this conversation. Then it says that the current commissioners, the 3 of them, should be vetted for suitability within 30 days. So should this bill pass in the referendum, then the current IEBC chair and the 2 commissioners left serving should be vetted for suitability within 30 days. But you can see that the overriding principle when you look at the administrative proposals is to start on a new slate so that this vetting is also shrouded in doubt. Is it really going to clear anyone, or is it just intended to send them home through a process that looks legitimate and to give legitimacy to their exit? Because the overriding administrative proposal was that we start on a clean slate. So this vetting must just be a sham, might just be a sham and nothing credible. And so then you ask yourselves, with the IEBC commission, as it is constituted, going to be the entity that's carrying out the referendum, because the referendum has to be conducted by the IEBC. Will there be issues of conflict? Because the IEBC commissioner stands to be prejudiced if this thing passes. Are we going to have a legitimate referendum process if these 3 people conduct the referendum and they know that that referendum can send them home technically? So those are questions we need to be asking ourselves about the process going forward. To vet the current commissioners, it's proposed to have a vetting panel that's composed of a chairperson who has to have the qualifications of a Supreme Court judge. That means he or she has to be an advocate with over 15 years experience. And then we have 2 members nominated by political parties, 1 from parliamentary political parties, 1 nominated by the majority party, and the other nominated by the minority party. Now you can see how parliamentary political parties are busy excluding other political parties in the fight of reconstituting the IEBC. And the IEBC is charged with carrying out elections for the whole country. Are these other political parties going to have fair play by this IEBC that's dominated by the presence of only certain political parties to the exclusion of others? The other members of the vetting panel will be members of the religious groups, and then the Public Service Commission is supposed to offer secretariat services. The IEBC currently has the task of determining election disputes, especially, and these are disputes that arise from nominations and the list of candidates and the party list. Right, that now exists in the Constitution. It is proposed that they stop carrying out this duty and focus just on organizing and arranging elections. Then they provide that, electoral disputes should be determined in a timely manner, and Parliament should make a law providing for this. The other provision is that the IEBC should ensure that the lists it receives from political parties, the list of candidates and the party list it receives from political parties should conform with the provisions of Article 54.2 and Article 81B. Article 54.2 is the one that provides for PWDs, the progressive realization of at least 5% PWDs in representation. And 81B is the one that deals with the gender balance. So that's what it is there. So what is that provision is actually saying is that a party in its list of candidates must ensure 2/3 of those names are women and at least 5% are PWDs. I can see this provision being abused by political parties, nominating these special interest groups or special category candidates in areas where the party has a weak showing or doesn't have a strong presence. So that, yes, they will do it to comply, the list will be totally compliant, but the final candidates elected will not give us the result we are looking at because in the areas where they're going to put these people, the special categories, will be areas where they're unlikely to be voted in. So that, for instance, let me take, we have ODM, we have Jubilee. So let's say Jubilee now elects, nominates the special interest groups in Nyanza. It is unlikely that those people will get votes in Nyanza. So it will be done for compliance with the list, but that compliance will not translate into these people actually accessing leadership positions. So I think we need stronger safeguards than just saying the list should be compliant. And it's vice versa for ODM. If ODM nominated people in Jubilee strongholds like Mount Kenya, those people most certainly will not get elected. So it can be used, the compliance can be achieved, but we may not achieve what we're looking at in terms of trying to get compliance. So those are it for the IEBC amendments. We also have amendments touching on the National Assembly and Senate. And in respect to the National Assembly and Senate, the provision is that we expand the size of the National Assembly to 363. And in these 363 seats, there is no provision for nomination of candidates. So articles in 97 and 98 that relate to provision of nomination of candidates or nomination of people, the party list issue has been totally deleted. So we are now left with a situation where we have 363 seats with 290 constituencies. That leaves us with 70 other seats that shall be filled in a manner that is not provided for in the steering committee report. If you look at the report, it does not say anywhere how the 70 seats shall be filled. But when they've held discussions outside, the technical team has been talking to Kenyans and other groups, they have tried to explain how these multi-member seats will be filled. Even if, as they explain, I think it's crucial and important that we concretize the manner of filling these 70 seats in the Constitution, and it shouldn't be left to explanations. Because what that does is that any other time we have elections, somebody can come up with any formula because the formula is not concretized either in the constitutional law. So whatever they're explaining should be concretized in a document that we can always look back to. Then the other thing is the manner in which the 70 seats are to be filled, they explain shall be based on the census, and using the census, they shall use population density to determine who gets this seat. And going by that census and going by that category, we find that 40% of those seats are clustered in one area, and only 27 counties shall benefit from this. And this is really, really unfortunate because it amounts implications on resource allocation, because each member of parliament gets CDF. So a constituency that has multiple members will receive multiple CDF allocations, which is very, very unfair to other constituencies. Secondly, how will 2 to 3 MPs work within a constituency? I'm sure they will be knocking shoulders and heads and knuckles every other time, because they'll be trying to assert themselves as the super MP for the area and trying to outdo each other. And that's going to be very contentious going forward. So I think that's a very, very something to look out for. And then the other question then you could start asking yourself, is this a backdoor way of reviewing boundaries? Because the task of reviewing boundaries sits with the IBC. And the Constitution sets out very clearly the factors to consider when reviewing boundaries. And it's not just population density. There's so many other things that we need to look at. So that giving some people multiple constituencies amounts to giving a space of land like a review of boundaries so that they have more representation than other regions. And I think that's really unfair. This should have awaited a boundaries review so that areas that need more representation would be determined at that time. So this is very interesting. And then the other question that would come there, why the magic number 363? What does the 363 reflect? And why did they settle for it? There's just no justification for it in the entire document, and there's no explanation why they settle on 363. So that's very, very hard to understand. And for now, we don't know. And then beyond this 363, we'll have cabinet ministers being ex officio members of the House. So the House is going to have probably 375 members at the end of the day. And that's very untenable. As it were right now, members of the National Assembly keep saying they don't get enough time to contribute to discussions and debates on the floor because there are too many, and there are 340 something. So when they get to 375, what's going to happen? I think we're going to ask, are we going to get adequate representation in the Assembly? Are voices going to be heard really through our elected members? I think we've got to keep this low. And also the tax burden in terms of salaries is something we need to think about. Now, the other thing about the National Assembly again, is that it has taken away the 47 county MP seats. Those are now not provided for in the amendments. The 97B that provided for the 47 county MPs has been deleted. And I think this is a drawback for gender gains. It's a total drawback for gender gains. Looking at that setup, there's no provision that assures us that the 2/3 gender balance is going to be achieved in the National Assembly. And this is really sad and a slap in the face, especially considering that there's already an advisory to dissolve parliament because they have not achieved the 2/3 gender rule. And then within that atmosphere, we get a document that actually takes away the few seats that were helping to balance the gender in the Assembly, and then makes no provision for how we're going to achieve the 2/3 gender rule. I think the least that Kenyans would have expected was a provision that answers that question. And it's a very simple arithmetic. We just need to import the wording of Article 177 into Article 97 so that the Assembly is permitted to nominate such number of either gender that shall allow it to achieve gender balance. So I think we have a problem and a lot of drawbacks with that provisions for the National Assembly. Still on the National Assembly, we find that in the proposed system and structure, we are going to have a prime minister coming from the National Assembly. We've all heard about the expanded executive, which will include a president, a deputy president, a prime minister, and 2 deputy prime ministers. So with this structure, it is proposed that the prime minister shall be a member of the National Assembly. So he must have been elected as an MP and be sitting in the National Assembly. Then the president has the power and prerogative to appoint from the National Assembly one person to become a prime minister. And the president has the power to sack this person at will. At the same time, the president has the power to nominate 2 people from cabinet to be deputy prime ministers. Now, why 2 and not 1 or 3 is not explained. There's no justification for having 2 deputy prime ministers. No tasks are assigned so that we can delineate that the 2 prime ministers will actually be carrying out 2 different functions. In fact, their tasks are just defined as assisting the prime minister in his duties. So why do we need 2 people assisting the prime minister when the president has only 1 deputy? It doesn't make sense to me. And I don't know whether it makes sense to you, but those are the issues that we see coming out of that proposal of a 5-man executive up there. Now, the other concern is that the prime minister shall be a member of the National Assembly. The prime minister shall be the leader of government business in the assembly. The prime minister shall be in charge of the legislative agenda of the National Assembly. So you can see that the prime minister will be a very powerful and key person in the National Assembly. Indeed, in the order of respect for the National Assembly, the Prime Minister comes after the Speaker. So he's a very senior person and a very key member of the National Assembly. Then the same person who is very key in the National Assembly, at the same time, will be in charge of the cabinet ministers and in charge of functions of the ministries, which means is also a very key and strong member of the executive. Now, we will therefore be importing into the legislature a very strong member of the executive. At the same time, we see that the proposal is to appoint some cabinet ministers from the legislature, from the National Assembly. So again, we have more influence of the executive in the National Assembly. If you look at our current constitution and what Kenyans had asked for was the separation of powers and the independence of institutions, so that the legislature would not be infiltrated by the executive, to enable the legislature to carry out effective oversight over the executive. Now, if the cabinet ministers are members of the National Assembly, will we be able to see instances where the assembly summons them and asks them to respond to questions the way we see right now? I think that will be diluted, the oversight role will be affected and will be in jeopardy. And I think it's important that we maintain the separation of the doctrine of separation of institutions, and we have separate arms of government being independent as per the current constitution. Now, the other provision relating to the National Assembly is the Senate. Now, they provide that the Senate shall have 94 seats. That means each county shall have 2 senators of either gender. Again, I will say that there's no justification for having 94 senators. If this was supposed to be a sweetener for women, I think they failed greatly, because I do not think this is what the women are looking for. And women do not want to lose power in the National Assembly to be taken to the Senate. The National Assembly has its space and has its role where women are required. And indeed, the Senate has its role where women are required. But it would be very, very easy to even nominate up to 17 women to Senate to make it gender compliant. And there's no need to burden the taxpayer with another 47 senators just to try and hoodwink women that we've given you some role up there. Women want a presence in the National Assembly. We don't want drawbacks on the gains made already by having the 47 county MPs and provisions for nominations. And this gimmick of putting the women in the Senate, I think, is not something Kenyan women are going to buy into. But I'd like to hear your views on that. Again, there are no nominations in Senate, there are no nominations in the National Assembly, and this is something that affects political parties because there's a way parties get clout from doing this. And also, it's not just a loss for political parties, it's also a loss for youth, women, and PWDs, because it's through these nominations that we nurture them and train them to take up future seats as members of parliament. So I think nominations is also a drawback and something people need to ask to defend going forward. Now, the last thing in relation to the National Assembly is the provision that the official leader of opposition, will be the first runner-up in the presidential election and shall have at least 25% of the seats in parliament. And where he doesn't get 25%, they can enter into coalitions to be able to achieve that. So that is it for the National Assemblies. When it comes to the county assemblies, the provisions are around party lists. They ask that party lists now be dependent or be distributed depending on the total votes received by a political party and not the number of seats in the assembly. I think this is a very critical provision because it will allow parties who do not get to win the seats but won a lot of votes across the board to also be able to nominate someone into the assembly. Right now, we have the affirmative action clause in the Constitution that is found in Article 177, the one that provides that the assembly can nominate such number of either gender as to achieve gender balance, as to achieve a 2/3 gender balance. It is proposed that this have a sunset clause and that this comes to lapse after 10 years. The term of the assembly is provided for. Right now, the term of the assembly in the Constitution is 5 years, but that it doesn't match up with the terms given for parliament, president, and governor. So this amendment is supposed to bring it in tandem so that now the term of assembly is proposed to lapse on the date of the next general election. It provides that an MCA can be recalled. Currently, there's no recall clause for MCAs. And I just wonder how this will play out going forward, because I think every time a governor is impeached, he might try to play into recalling an MCA. It's going to be a very interesting scenario. It provides that a deputy governor should have a county executive role so that they stop idling and they have some functions to undertake. They also propose that county executives should not lose their seats when a governor ceases to be a governor. So I think that's okay. And then it provides that a candidate for governor should consider having a running mate of the opposite gender. Now, that is not couched in mandatory terms and therefore is of no effect. I'm not even sure why it's in the document. It should only find its way there if it was couched in mandatory terms. And if that were to be able to happen, then we'd also ask for the same to happen to other posts where we have running mates, so that every running mate has, or everybody with a deputy, make sure that they are of opposite gender. In terms of finances, they propose the Ward Development Fund of 5% and the increased revenue to the counties at from 15 to 35%. So that is it for constitutional amendments generally that would affect our work and business as political parties. Now, then the document also has statutory proposals, proposals to improve the legislation. Now, when we look at this, we need to remember that lawmaking is a function of the National Assembly, so that these proposals will not see the light of day unless Parliament passes them. So when we look at them, let us keep it at the back of our minds that these are just proposals, but they will find, if at all they find their way to Parliament, they might be passed as they are, they might be rejected, or they might be amended substantially. But let us just know what is in them so that if time comes, we are able to engage them in a positive manner. And it also gives us a thinking of what they're looking at around the electoral plane going forward. So I think it's just worth looking at them. So the first thing, the first act we'll look at there is the Elections Act. Now in the Elections Act, a lot of the proposals actually are for the Elections Act. The other have very, very few suggestions. So when it comes to the Elections Act, the first thing they do is to redefine a voter. And the voter is redefined to include not just a person who has applied, but somebody who has been included in the register already. And I think this was to address issues that arose in 2017 where people were saying, we have applied, we have letters, why can't we vote with this document, even if our names are not in the register? So I think that's trying to seal that loophole. Then it says registration of voters should close 120 days to the election. Currently it's 3 months, this increases it to 4 months. Party nominations also are increased to 4 months from 3 months, so that nominations could be concluded earlier. Then there's the provision that the register of voters published by the IBC should omit the full details of a voter's ID and passport number. I think this is a Pandora's box. It's room for a lot of mischief, and I'd like us to speak to it when we go forward. Then it proposes that IBC should publish an election timetable 18 months to the next election. I think this would be very useful in terms of allowing people to plan and organize themselves around elections, as opposed to the last time when 6 months to the election, things were still clouded and cloggy, and we were still running cases in court to determine when and where the election should be held. So I think that's progressive. And then it also requires that agents be registered 14 days to the election. So that is there under provision. I don't know what you as political parties think about registering your agents 14 days to an election, 2 weeks to. The other proposals are that a political party or an individual can actually ask for the register of voters and be given, as long as this is done at least 60 days before the election. So I think this is progressive because in the past, individuals could not actually access the voters register. And then it establishes a criteria that political parties must abide to during nomination of candidates and development of party lists. These are just tenets of good governance and good elections, free and fair, credible elections. So they include democratic, free and fair. The process should be democratic, free and fair. It should be inclusive and participatory, giving fair and equal opportunities to everyone, especially the special interest groups. It should be open, transparent, and accountable. It should be credible, and top of all, it should be peaceful. I think that word peaceful is very strong there. Once we have a peaceful election, I think the other factors fall into place. But Kenya, we know our elections, our nominations are always marred with violence. And I think that's something political parties should strive to drop and do away with. Still on the Elections Act, it is suggested or proposed that a member of the party may, up to 30 days before nominations, object to the clearing of an aspiring candidate. This is before the party primaries. A member of the party can say it is wrong to have cleared X to aspire on our party ticket. And the grounds for doing that would be that the person is not a member of the political party, or the person is not qualified to hold that office, or the nomination does not or the act. These disputes are to be had within 25 days, and any appeal goes to the political parties tribunal. I just concern about the 25 days. If you can do this application 30 days before the nomination, and up to 25 days, you are still waiting for the party to determine the dispute, at what point will you go to the political parties tribunal and get heard before the party primaries are held? Those timelines are a little too tight. Then it provides that every party must establish internal dispute resolution tribunals, and that disputes should be determined within 60 days. It provides that the tribunals must be expeditious, efficient, lawful, transparent, and procedurally fair. Then it provides that a party may provide that ADR must be undertaken, so that where a party says that people should attempt ADR before approaching the tribunal, the Act is proposing that you have no right to access the tribunal before attempting ADR. I see this as a barrier to accessing the tribunal because sometimes the dispute ADR process might be too slow and might just be a barrier to getting justice before the elections occur. So these are things you must consider when drafting your party constitutions. Then it provides that party lists should be submitted at least 150 days before the election. So this is 5 months before the elections. And you saw earlier there that party primaries will be held 4 months to the election. So this is trying to tie the knot on candidates who aspire, lose out, and then are offered spaces in the party list. If this list is submitted 5 months before the election, that means it's submitted way before the party primaries. And so people who lose out in the party primaries cannot subsequently get their names into the party lists. And I think that would be interesting for political parties. Probably they'll reject it. So then there's, it provides for rights of agents, and it says agents have a right to be trained. They have a right to access all documents relating to that election, especially the party registers, and they have a right to be protected from the law, from all harm and other things. The other thing that it provides is responsibilities of agents. And the responsibility of agents are outlined there. I'll highlight two main ones that are very interesting. There's the one that it says an agent must sign all official documents as required. Those of you who've been agents will know that this is a tricky provision, because sometimes you have not agreed with what the returning officer has written there. Now, if you're forced to sign it, it then binds you that your party signed and agreed to that outcome. So I think this provision can be very interesting if not looked at properly. Then it also provides that an agent must remain within the polling station at all times and cannot leave without the permission of the returning officer. I think, again, this is just not necessary because the agent is not under arrest. Why should you only leave there with the permission of the RO? I think that's unnecessary. But I think all this is intended to ensure that the agent stays to the end and signs the document. But I don't think you should be forced to sign any document pertaining to the tallying or the result that's being declared. Still on the Elections Act, it provides that independent candidates must not have been members of any political party at least 3 months preceding the date of the election. I think this gives independents a window to participate in party primaries and get annoyed and run as independents thereafter, because party primaries will have been held 4 months and they can resign immediately thereafter and become independents and still participate in the next election as an independent. PWDs have been given the power to elect their own representatives so that they come and form a Congress as PWDs on their own within the political party and then elect people to be nominated under the slot for PWDs themselves. I think this is an interesting provision because it might make the electorate say, because you have a position where you elect yourselves for, we will not give you the mainstream positions, and it might serve to exclude them going forward. But I know that this position was bargained by PWDs themselves into the document. Then it says that election officers are to be appointed competitively, and it provides people exclusions for people who cannot be appointed as election officers. These include persons who have been convicted of an election offense in the last 5 years. It includes persons who contested in the last 5 years, not won, but contested. And then it includes agents of a candidate and then anyone who holds office in a political party. Finally, in relation to the Elections Act, it says that the form that is filled at the polling station declaring the result is a primary form in terms of tallying and verifying an election result. I think this is crucial because in the past, there have been challenges to the primary form and what forms the document that should be looked at when tallying election results. Then it provides that the commission, the IBC, shall approve the manner in which results are to be transmitted. I think this is something that should be looked at because it shouldn't be left to individuals. I think there should be a law that defines how results are to be transmitted. Then it also provides that media houses wishing to report and cover the elections must be accredited by the commission. I think this can be used as a gag on media houses that they deem to be unfriendly. And I think this is something media houses should look up for and look out for. It may not just be right. It might be a way of concealing information that is available to the public. Then there's a provision that a political party may recall a nominated member for insubordination of the party or for advancing the interests of another party. I think this is very interesting, but I think it answers to scenarios that have occurred in the past, and so may be necessary to have in the document. Now, when it comes to the Political Parties Act, there are two main provisions. The first one is on how political parties fund is distributed. And it's proposed there that the fund shall be distributed dependent on the number of women, youth, and PWDs that are elected on a political party's ticket. It is hoped that this will make parties have more women, youth, and PWDs going for elections, and hoping that they will be elected. Then it proposes the establishment of a dispute resolution committee at every branch of the party, so that parties can decide or determine disputes at the branch. And from the branch, then appeals can go to the headquarters where the appeals committee will sit. I think this is a great way of empowering branches to carry out their duties. And then it also provides that the tribunal shall conclude cases within 2 months. Now, when it comes to the IEBC Act, the other time we talked about the IEBC provisions within the Constitution. Now, there are also proposals that relate to the IEBC Act, which is a statute. And so these proposals relate to the duties of the vice chair and the chairperson, especially. So it's provided that the vice chair cannot perform tasks reserved for the chairperson in the Act. And I think this is interesting. This is very, very interesting because it builds on a scenario that occurred where the vice chairperson purported to declare the presidential election results. And yet under the Constitution, under the Act, it was the chairperson who should do it. So now it is being made very clear that the vice chairperson cannot perform such tasks because they are the reserve of the chairperson. But we must warn ourselves that if we make it this strict, if we lock the door on this completely, what happens where the chairperson is for any reason incapacitated and cannot make his way to read the result? Or if for any reason, and touch wood on this, and Lord forbid this, the chairperson ceases to exist, ceases to live, what happens? The country will be thrown into limbo. So I think it would be very, very sad to totally close the door on this. A deputy deputizes a chairperson and should be able to stand in for the chairperson when the chairperson is not there. So probably we just need to build in safeguards and checks into the provision and say that the chairperson, vice chair shall only perform those tasks where, and then make the exclusions there, like where the chairperson is incapacitated, dies, or blah, 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 so that that is clearly provided for. Otherwise, all I have to do is kidnap, abduct the chairperson, and then I have a Trump scenario where I'm refusing to accept the result, and no one else can declare it. So I think we need to build checks into that. It provides that the secretary should serve for a term of 3 years and 1 year, eligible for reappointment for 1 more term. It establishes an IEBC fund. This is trying to create independence of the IEBC, so that it doesn't depend on the exchequer for its resources and its ability to function. Then it provides that the IEBC shall publish on its website every information relating to its mandate and the electoral process. I think this is to make people be able to obtain election results, the documents, the forms, the various polling forms, quickly, especially for purposes of filing an election petition. So that, again, I think is progressive. When it comes to the Election Campaign Financing Act, again, we have a few proposals in there, and the proposals relating to the Election Campaign Financing Act just broaden its application. Right now, it only applies to the election campaign period, and the first proposal there is to expand its application so that a campaign financing period refers to the period even during party primaries. So immediately a candidate is identified, the election campaign financing period starts. So that expands the period of which the law relates. And then it just provides that the limit should have regard to the remuneration and benefits of the office to which the limit relates. Finally, they have the Election Offences Act, which also has some proposals. The first proposal, again, is to expand the application of Election Offences Act. Right now, election offences can only occur during campaigns for elections, but they want to broaden that and bring in other parameters. And these include planning and implementation of elections and referenda. It includes education of voters. It includes recruitment, appointment, and training of election officers. It includes the period of testing and trial of electoral equipment. It includes a period of registration of voters, nomination of candidates, it campaigns for elections, and the voting, counting, tallying, and declaration of results. So you can see how broad they've made the application of the Election Offences Act. They also introduce some new offenses and expand the definition of the bribery offense. Now, one of the new offenses is that any person who uses force, threat, deception, or violence to compel a person to transfer their vote or register in a particular area commits an offense. So this only applies where force, threat, and deception is used, or violence. But if you can nicely convince someone to transfer their vote, that would not be a crime. But if you used force, blah, 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 it would be a crime, and it would be, you'd be subject to a fine of 4 million, up to 4 million, or a sentence of up to 12 years, or even both concurrently. So it can be that bad. And then the other offense there is that a person who harasses, intimidates, coerces, or threatens to cause physical harm to a candidate commits an offense and can be fined up to 2 million, can be jailed for up to 6 years, or can be subject to both. Again, a very serious offense there, looking by its nature. And so something we need to avoid. I think these are things we should preach to our party members and candidates, to desist from violence and harming candidates and this kind of thing. I think it's something that also flows from the code of conduct, the political party's code of conduct. And then in relation to the offense of bribery, it refers to the fact that bribery will not now just relate to the election period, but it shall also refer to the period during party primaries. So if you bribe someone during party primaries or during the election campaign period, it will be an offense. So ladies and gentlemen, those are the proposals in the BBI Steering Committee report that relate to political parties, elections, governance, and gender issues. Thank you all so much for listening to me. I will now listen to you, take your comments and questions, and I'll be ready to respond. Asante sana.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rosalind, for such a wonderful presentation. And Lillian, do we have you, Lillian?
Yes, Isaac, I am on board.
Karibu sana.
Thank you.
Yeah, you may proceed.
Okay, thank you so much, Rosalind, and thank you, Isaac, for the cue. Rosalind, that was such a detailed presentation. I must confess that reading the BBI, going and sieving through, digest. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, we can hear.
Oh, great. So I'm saying, Rosalind, you have done a very good job. You have sieved it for us, and it is much easier for us to narrow down as a party so that we know the areas to concentrate on. We are still digesting it, a number of issues that you will clarify. I also want to take advantage of this time to, talk about emerging issues that may not be directly within the report, but maybe they are being discussed outside here. For example, this is on a light note. On the social media, it is said the report has not been launched yet, so it shouldn't actually be discussed. So I'm wondering, is there any legal implication about a report that has not been launched, and why should we discuss it? That's on a light note. The other thing that you have talked about is on the BBI and its impact on gender. Its impact on gender, about the 70 seats kindly give a clarification about the 70 seats, because outside here, there is the misconception that 50 of the 70 seats will go to one county. Kindly give a clarification on that. While you do that, I will also invite the other members to come in. I can see my chairman, Bwana Imoite. I have seen the SG on board. I have also seen the leader, the youth leader, and the women league leader. So after that, I will pick your views kindly. Bwana Chairman, you
Do we still have Lillian?
Yeah, we still are. You can proceed on chairman, and then the SG can make his remarks, and then also the youth leader in that order.
you will be followed by the
But chairman, you may proceed.
Yeah, it sounded to me like Lillian was still on the floor. I must say, Roslyn, I think echoing what Lillian has said. I'm still hearing a voice. I think it's still Lillian making effort.
The youth leader, and then
Proceed on, Bona Chairman. Yes, proceed.
All right, okay. I was just saying that echoing from the sentiment that has been expressed by Lillian on the BBI report generally, Lady Roslyn, you have done a good job to take us through this. Because again, what we have had out here are abridged versions, but now you have given us the complete picture of the whole thing, looking at the various items that are of concern to political parties. When you're talking about the IEBC as an institution that plays this critical role in the electoral process itself, those changes that have been proposed, of course, are going to be of of interest to us as political parties. The issues surrounding the 2/3 gender rule. Of course, these are issues also that political parties and the general populace is paying attention to, because like you observed, the current parliament is afoul of the law, because they were supposed to have met this 2/3 gender requirement as of now, but they haven't. You look at the composition of the National Assembly as proposed in light of that. And then of course you go down to the counties. You hear a lot of things being said about the intentions of the BBI report, where the county governments are concerned, especially with the issues to do with the proposed increased allocation, raising the figure from, I think, a minimum of 15% to 35%. This is going to be of interest. But of course, again, like you have observed, Lady Roslyn, in your presentation, a good number of these things don't have to be written into law for them to be implemented, such that you get the idea that yes, BBI is here, the handshake is here, good things in it, but again, the overall picture, sometimes you look at it and you're saying, okay, do we need to wait for these things to be rewritten or put into the constitution for them to happen, or something like that? And again, there have been a number of other things that you have pointed out there that are yet in the constitution as it is, but BBI is still making, is still pronouncing itself on this issue. So probably you're asking yourself, so again, what is the issue here? But again, maybe I'll just say this so that I allow the membership to ventilate on this. There's what they would say usually about constitutions, about laws, about rules. You see the letter and the spirit. You get the idea. We have a good document in Katiba 2010, and perhaps its implementation is what has been a problem here, and that other than what we have in the Constitution itself, there are usually things that guide its operations, the spirit, as it were, and things, and certain other norms and traditions. You look at the example we have with what is playing out in the in what they bill as one of the greatest democracies in the world, America itself. You have laws, but you realize or you observe from what is going on that for quite a bit of time before Trump happened, most of what they had was guided by norms. It was actually guided by norms because you get, I think, for instance, there's this office, the General Services Administration, that has refused to do the traditional thing that is supposed to be done to accept that Joe Biden has won this election, and then therefore do something, sign some document, and let the transition process kick in. But because Trump happened, this thing is now different. And then you have other institutions that have traditionally been doing their jobs, but again, it has depended on how individuals occupying these offices handle themselves, behave. That's why we've had things moving. So you get to look at that and compare that to what we have. Katiba 2010 and BBI and its proposals, there are issues around there that have to deal more with how we do things ourselves, how we conduct ourselves, such that we may not really need some of these mega proposals that are being put forward for us to move along as a country. But then again, perhaps we'll talk about this again going forward in greater detail. But I'll leave the floor to the membership. I think SG is in the house. Maybe you can ventilate as well on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Bwana Chairman, and all participants. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Thank you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Asante sana. First, before I say anything, let me take this opportunity to welcome all of you and thank you for sparing time for this important meeting. Then number two, I'd like to convey apologies from the party leader who was to be here in this meeting, but he's delayed in another very important meeting, which is aimed at taking our party to another level. So if he finishes before we finish, he will join. And thank you, CMD, for this. Now, straight to the point. Let me start from where the chairman said that the problem is not the constitution. The problem is, do we have the goodwill to do what is right? Because basically, we have the norms. Our Katiba, which we have in Kenya, is a very good, and it has been hailed as the most progressive. The question is, how much of it did we implement? Number two, we are talking of building preachers initiative, like our coordinator for the day, Madam Lillian, alluded. The BBI has not been launched, but if anyone is keen to look at how it's being launched, then it leaves a lot to be desired than anything, because like now there has been a training. I'm sure you know there's a training of whoever they call them, coordinators, all the way to the constituency level. It's been done in cocoons. And you can see people and picking their friends. So which bridges are we building here? Okay? Because for sure, if we are building bridges, it means we have to get both the antagonist and the protagonist to sit and have one level. But now, if we're having others on one side saying, okay, these are the views, we want to give our input, you're not allowed. I really don't know if what we need is a document or what we need is goodwill first. Madam Odede has taken us through what they want us to do, the nominations and everything. Like now, let me just ask this question. If parties are conducting nominations 4 months to the day of elections, and then independents have to be partyless 3 months to elections, honestly, are we not doing something more retrogressive than what we had before? Because then, you see, unless this BBI institutionalizes parties, okay, then there's no way we are going to do what we call party democracy. And the party democracy is basically the root cause of any good governance. Okay? So for me, I'm finding this document totally retrogressive. I'm sorry to say, and it's my own opinion. For instance, we are talking of the Senate, which is the house in charge of devolution. But if we have read what is in that, I don't know if anyone has cared to see what's there. Honestly, do we really need the Senate? Okay? You cannot put a body in charge, then you take out all the powers. Because if we're increasing the allocation to the counties to 35%, then where should oversight be? Should it be in the House or in the Senate? That's just a question I'm asking myself. So I think if there was anything we were to do, first we need to be very honest. Because it's not that we don't know the right thing to do. It's not that we don't have. I can tell you places like Zambia, they are back where we left when I was in primary school, and I'm not very young. Okay? And when you see how they are running their things, okay, you wonder we who promulgated a constitution in 2010, okay, and then we are now acting like Trump. Seriously, it's not about the document. It's about, okay, what personally I want to see is for BBI to give a way forward on how good or bad, how we are going to implement this constitution. Number two, how we are to ensure that this few, some group somewhere see how this BBI is actually helping the people at the grassroots. Because, for instance, let us be very honest. You talk about, here we are talking about submitting the party list 150 days, way before nominations. Number one, where do we have a party list? I don't know if they considered that. And who should be in the party list? Okay? Because you find that during the nominations, okay, you will get their people here, 1, 2, and they're competing, and because you know of the chances and everything, you know, it's not all about the people who are elected, but there are others who will play a supportive role in the party, and those are the people to be put in the party list. But if you tell us now, give it 150 days, way before nominations. So how do you help parties get people to participate in the electoral process in party politics, which is now the root cause of democracy. Because if we are not able to exercise democracy within the parties, I don't know how we are going to do it when we have too many players in the fields. Anyway, thank you for the opportunity, and I yield my time back.
Thank you so much. Lillian, do we have you?
Yes, Isaac.
Isaac, can I just make a clarification somewhere? Just
Okay.
one little thing. I just wanted to make it clear to the membership that the party has not taken a position on the BBI report, and that people are free to air their views. Don't hold back. Say things just like SG has ventilated, like I've said stuff. So until we sit down and take a position and then say this is how we are proceeding, let's be free to say our bit. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Enoch Onkoba, Thomas Omari, you can give your remarks, and then we give an opportunity to Rosalind to respond. Then we'll take some round of more questions. Then after Rosalind is done, Lillian Anyango can take over.
Asante, Chairman. My concern was on what Madam Ross took us through. Now, this BBI, I thought that it was to solve what happened in 2017. That's what they said. That's never again. Shall we go back to what we witnessed in 2017, 2007? But I didn't see anything of that sort. I only saw changes, structural changes. Let's look at IBC. The personalities of IBC in 2017 never messed up the election. It was the system. So I was talking about the electoral systems, transmission, and the process itself. That's where elections are messed. I was asking Rosalind, what about it? I mean, that's the remedy that we so madly wanted, how we can avoid clashes again in Kenya. Not about sharing dockets. Because in 2002, when Mike Kibaki won, there was no clash because elections were held in a very responsible way. So I really wanted Madam Rosalind to take us back through the IBC and specifically how they can be taken into account to hold an election which can be accepted, like that one of 2002. Thank you very much, Chairman. Chairman, you get me?
I've heard you, Thomas.
Yeah.
Asante.
On Koba, maybe I request you kindly wait.
Yes.
Rosalind, I want you to respond after Rosalind has given her contribution, and then you'll be the next one. Kindly.
Sawa.
Rosalind,
That's in order.
Thank you, Isaac, and thank you, members, for your comments and input. I like the vigor with which you are responding to this document, and it just shows that you're keen and you want to be sure that the proposals meet the needs for which they are intended. I'll start with Lillian, and Lillian is talking about emerging issues. The first thing she asks me is, the report is not launched. Is it therefore a valid document? If you look at the document that set up the steering committee, if you look at the Gazette notice, there was no provision for launching the report. The task that was given to the steering committee was to come up with a report and present it to the president in due course. And I think we also a public presentation of the document to the president in Kisii. And there is really no firm legal requirement that the report be launched. I think the launching is a PR exercise just to get it on track. So the fact that they met and forgot to say we now launch the document has no legal implication on the validity of or legitimacy of the report. Now, when it comes to BBI impact on gender, and Lillian, you're talking specifically around the mixed member representation and how the 70 seats will be distributed. Now, if you're here in the beginning, you would have me talk to this quite extensively. The mixed member representation, one, is not provided for in the document. It's an explanation we are getting over the media and from the technical team. And if you remember, I said they need to concretize these provisions, either in the constitutional amendment or in a statute, because we'd like to be certain as people or as political parties, as candidates and as Kenyans, we'd like to be certain how those seats are going to be filled up. So right now, there is no written provision anywhere in the entire document how the mixed member representation shall be achieved. But what they're explaining to us outside is that they're going to use the last census data. And you know that data is also being questioned. People think it was tweaked to give some people unfair advantage. And when we look at that census data, the seats, the high density populations are found in 62 constituencies, and 40% of these, 40 of these constituencies are found in Mount Kenya and Nairobi. And that is quite concerning to a lot of people. And they think there was something that was done. All along, we've known highest populations are in Western, in Kisii, and other places. So, but this time the tables are turned, the highest populations are actually in Central Kenya. And this is very, very interesting. So that is why there's a lot of debate and furor about this. And the other question being asked by most people is why should population density be the only factor being used to consider mixed member representation? Because if you look at how constituencies are delineated, we look at several factors. Even the space, the size of the land and the lay of the land should be considered. And that's why counties like Lamu ended up getting constituencies. But now with this kind of data being used, it means the marginalized groups will continue to be marginalized, and some people will have overrepresentation. Now, this question of overrepresentation also has a lot of connotations. If a certain region has more representation, it means they have more MPs in parliament, and they will control the agenda of parliament because they can pool their votes together as a bloc to block out certain provisions being brought into parliament. So this is something we really need to think around, because if there are 62 constituencies and somebody already has their natural constituencies, then you get another 60 to add on to the power of your vote into the National Assembly. You start realizing that there are things that need to concern us as Kenyans around this mixed member representation. I think what we should be asking for is tell us to nominate as political parties the way the current provision says, because we have nominations. Let's use those seats to reach gender balance, and even though the 70 won't be sufficient, but let us achieve gender balance. Let parties nominate PWDs and let parties nominate youth. Or tuachane na history ya mixed member representation, because I can also see MPs from one constituency beginning to fight one another. So it might also be a conflict issue going forward. John, Lillian, I hope I've responded to your question. John comments broadly on several issues appearing in the BBI report that concern him. He's concerned about the drawbacks on the two-third gender role. He's concerned about drawbacks on IBC and the gross interference by parliamentary political parties in the constitution of IBC and IBC processes. I think this amounts to politicization of the election management body, which again, we should guard against. And you will see that the politicization belongs to just a clique of political parties. It's not broadly representative of all political parties. And those who get to sit at that table will definitely make decisions that favor their parties and actually do not favor the other parties. So we should be very alert and alive to these issues. You also talk broadly of the fund, the money going into the counties. A lot of people are quite concerned that money is being given with no functions attached to it. And I think that is something that we really need to think around. And how will we oversight the use of this money adequately at the county level? So these are the questions that are being asked. And how will the grassroots experience this increased money in the branches? How will it change my lifestyle at the grassroots? So those are the questions people are asking. And John, you're right to flag this out. You also talk about whether we need to have a referendum or whether we had to wait for a referendum to implement the Constitution, why we have not implemented the Constitution, and do we really need all these proposals? When you ask about all these proposals, it reminds me that this BBI document is proposing at least amendments to 68 articles of the Constitution. If you know the Constitution, I think we have about 250 clauses. So that amounts to at least 1/3 of the Constitution is being amended by a team of 16 people and a non-legal process. I think we should be very worried as a nation when we think around that. Benjamin comes in very, very strongly in critiquing the BBI process in itself. And beyond the process, he's also critiquing the current implementation of the Constitution. He is of the opinion that we have a very good Constitution, but what is lacking is implementation. And I totally agree with you, Benjamin. We have a very progressive Constitution. We have a very good Constitution. And we ought to have conducted an audit of the Constitution, its implementations, its difficulties, challenges, before we began a process of amending it. Because now we are amending it, and we're probably not amending it holistically, because they're only amending it with line to some 9 questions. Will we then again 2 years down the road have to carry out an amendment? I think you're right that we ought to probably have had an audit before we really undertake all these proposals of amendment. And then you ask whether, are we really building bridges? I don't think we are. I do not think we are, because what we are getting in response to all the concerns is a very stiff wall. People are just very stiff-necked around how they're going to engage others, and especially others who are not thinking like them, others who are not of like-minded. So they quickly balkanize you as being opposed to the document, while you're probably just raising valid concerns. So I think these are things we need to call out because we are supposed to, if you look at the overriding objective of this process, was to come up with a cohesive society, an inclusive society. They talk largely about public participation, and yet they do not want to apply the same principles to looking at their document and report. If they really glorify public participation, inclusivity, and all these processes in the document, why are they intolerant to this happening in scrutinizing and accepting this document? I think that's really sad and something that should be spoken to. Yes, a lot of the provisions are retrogressive. And I think, again, they should be looked into. There's a lot of retrogressive provisions in here. One of the ones that we may not talk about because we are talking about political parties, but is of great concern, is the independence of the National Police Service and the establishment of a Kenya Police Council that is chaired by the CS for Interior. Now, that means we are actually now taking away the command, the independent command of the IG, and giving effective control of the police service to the CS Interior, which therefore means executive influence over the National Police Service. So there's so many retrogressive things in this document, other than just gender and others. So we've got to spend time just to look at it and pick them up and speak to them. Again, you talk about how this document will help at the grassroots. I don't know, because the grassroots have never been contacted around this document. In fact, if you ask people if they've ever seen the BBI report, ata ile ya last year or this one, a lot of people will tell you they've never seen it and they've never had occasion to look at it. So even as we are trying to discuss it now, at the grassroots, yenyewe watu hawana hii document, they are just listening to their party leaders. Some are saying fulani ametusomea na tuko sawa. And that's a very unfortunate route to take. And I think one of the things we should do, probably even as political parties, is undertake to educate our people on what the document is truly saying, so that when it comes to the time to vote, we shall vote wisely. If we don't do that, we shall also be guilty of having allowed a process that does not benefit the Kenyans to go through. Why do we have party lists? I agree with you, Benjamin, because the essence of nomination is to strengthen a party. So if a party had a candidate who was beaten at the ballot in party primaries, you may still want that person to be part of your representatives. So locking them out of the party lists at 5 months before the party primaries may not be the wisest thing to do, and actually compromises the independence of political parties to determine how they run and govern themselves. So I think that's something, again, we need to speak to. Thomas Omari, you talk about, do the proposals actually solve what they came out to do? Do they actually solve the problem of divisive elections, which we have suffered over time? I think they do not, in my estimation. I've read that document more than once. I do not see how it helps us to solve it. They propose to solve this by expanding the executive. But how does expanding the executive solve the problem of election violence and election intolerance to each other? I think our main problem in Kenya is the fact that we've ethnicized our vote. And we've ethnicized our vote, and then the winner takes it all problem compounds it, so that those who are excluded from the table of power will not even get jobs in this country at that point. When your surname is X, you're just ruled out. And I think those are the things we need to speak to, you know. How do we change these systems? How do we change corruption? How do we make sure that being in power is not the only way to enjoy being in Kenya? Because those are the things we need to address. People rush for it because when you're there, you're safe, you're secure, you have jobs, you have food, you have money. But again, it is not all Kenyans. It's just the few who are around the Mheshimiwa who see this. The rest of you suffer like me every day. So it doesn't solve anything. And we need deeper conversations as Kenyans around this story before we can get it. But you propose a suggestion there, which I agree with, that let us start by setting up a credible electoral systems. And I think that should also be key going forward. Credible electoral systems. Si zile saba mtambiwa watu wamelala usiku and you can't access them. So I think those are the things we are talking about going forward. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. On Koba, you can now give your remarks, and then Lilian and Nyango will take over. On Koba, karibu.
Asante Kinywa. Is it evening already? Good evening, members. And thank you, Kinywa, for facilitating this forum for us today to discuss this very, very funny document that people don't really understand, called the BBI. I don't know where we're building these bridges to. We are building bridges to nowhere. That is the best thing, the first thing we should say. Because if we are really building bridges, where were those bridges before? Who broke them? Those are pertinent questions we should ask ourselves. Did they exist in the first place? So we cannot be in a country of 47 million people and then allow two people, just because they had the opportunity to run for an election, one wins, the other loses, come to the table, sit together, and come up with 9 points, which to them they think is a problem that the country faces. You know, you were in this country when the president could not even know the price of bread. Aliulizwa swali, I think it was on NTV, akasema for 50, the price of bread. So how do you trust a man who doesn't even know the price of bread to think to tell you that this is a problem we have as a country? How do you trust such a person? Yeah, he is out of touch with the problems we have. If he says the price of bread is 450, then perhaps he thinks 450 is something very small for somebody to even fail to afford. So that is where we went wrong, and the whole process of the BBI process, I've always said it's an illegitimate process, and I would want to support the facilitator, Ms. Odede, by saying that it was an illegitimate process in the first place. So the issue of launching it or even not launching it doesn't come into play, because an illegitimate document from the first go, from the word go, shouldn't even have had all the amount of money spent on it that is public funds. The proposals there in the document, hata kama hatuipendi, we must also discuss, because we've lived in a country where we've been conditioned to think that politicians are our bosses when we actually their bosses. So they come up with things, we just follow them and approve what they want. But it's come a time, if there is anyone who messed up the BBI, if there is anyone who messed up the BBI, it is one Mwai Kibaki, because he brought something called free education. Now, the levels of literacy in this country, as one William Ruto says, wajinga walipungua. So the people are now vigilant. I'm sorry if you can hear some background trouble, because I'm in a burial somewhere. So what people are checking out. So utasikia kelele kidogo za pikipiki kwa sababu niko kwa parking. But if there's anyone, I was saying, as I was saying, if there's anyone who messed up the BBI thing, it's Mwai Kibaki, because alikuja kitu free primary education. So people are now seeing that we are being lied to. Most of the proposals therein, let me now come directly to the point we're discussing, the political, how it affects political parties directly, and how it affects the electoral process. Number one, you cannot tell us that the vice chairperson in IBC cannot do the roles of the chairperson. What will stop on Koba if I'm running for president and it's only the chairperson who can announce the results of the election? If I was running for president and then I realize I'm losing, what stops me from abducting the chairperson, go hide him somewhere, or even kill him for that purpose? Yeah, because now no one will announce the elections. So if I'll still remain in office. The proposals in the BBI, personally, I cannot trust anyone in office. You see the things that it proposes. I can't trust Uhuru Kenyatta as the president with those proposals. I can't trust Raila Odinga. I can't trust William Ruto. I cannot even trust Enoch Onkoba as the president with the proposal in the BBI. Because what it creates, it's a system whereby the executive has amassed all the functions. And, you know, even in the political parties process, what we need is a strong political parties act, where even the registrar of the political parties should be actually a part of the, we should take that off the judiciary and take it away from the executive and give them a fund for them to be independent. We cannot have a situation where she's, or let me not personalize it and say a registrar sits as an acting. We've had a registrar acting for 8 years, and then now because she happens to have the registrar does some things as the executive wants by killing some small political parties here and there, you now get appointed substantively.
Enoch.
Yes.
If you could summarize in the next half a minute, we'll appreciate, so that others can also talk. Thank you, Kiongozi.
I'll summarize in one. So if you talk about the gender rule, you are taking 47 to the Senate, you are removing from the National Assembly. You want to do nominal representation from, if the 290 elected are men or women for that matter, the 70 nominated cannot make 2/3 in the National Assembly. So we are not solving the problem, right? We may have time to discuss this in depth, but largely, if I was asked to support these proposals, I would say a big no. And now that my chairman has given me the opportunity to air my views because of a party position, I think the Youth League will have a position on this very soon, Bwana Chairman, if you allow us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Enoch. Bwana Chairman, as you can see, you are leading a revolt within this party, but we will talk. We will talk.
Democracy, Lillian, democracy. Freedom of expression, we must uphold
Nashkuru. Nashkuru mkubwa, nashkuru. Now, I want to give two ladies a quick chance to talk. We have Elizabeth Weru in charge of the Women League, and then we have Sonia McKenna. Please, ladies, kindly take the floor and let us hear what you're saying before we conclude. We'll start with Elizabeth and then Sonia. Liz, are you hearing me? Okay, maybe Sonia. Sonia, are you there?
Hi, yes, I'm here, my leader.
Yes, Sonia, you can take the floor. Let us know what your thoughts are about the presentation.
Thank you very much, Lillian, for the opportunity. I also want to appreciate Rosaline as well as the CMD team for what they are doing. My only challenge and my only question is that we had quite a number of sittings to deliberate on a number of issues as it pertains to BBI. And it is quite unfortunate that the document that we are discussing seems to be a very different copy from the first one that we had. So my question goes to the team, the whole panel, members and CMD, to kindly let us know how effective is our contribution? How well is it incorporated in the final compilation of the report that was sent? Number two, again, what assurance do we have that the time that we've spent here, the deliberations and the views that we are giving will still be incorporated? To add a voice to what my fellow members have said, it's so simple. Like Enoch shared and said that two people sit and they have a handshake and it is shaking the whole nation. How can CMD help us be able to take charge that parties are accountable and can be held into more account even when they take up leadership, so that we are not left to the dining room or bedroom agreements that affect the whole nation? Because right now we have very critical matters in terms of governance, economic affairs, in terms of health issues, the pandemic. None of those issues is being addressed, and BBI has been put at the forefront, and it's made like a life and death matter, where else we still have the Katiba 2010, like my chairman had said that it's a perfect document and it hasn't been assimilated into the process. It has not been taken up. So what will change? Those are my views. Thank you very much, Tim. And to conclude it, I think the BBI is simply building barriers initiative as opposed to building bridges initiative. Over to you, Madam Lillian.
Thank you so much, Sonia. Rosaline, you can see that this party is highly democratic and we speak our mind. But don't take it like we have already taken a position on this. I think there's need to emphasize that, like the chairman had said earlier. Yes, now, first of all, members, allow me to remind you that this document, the beginning part of the document says bridges to a united Kenya. Actually, there's not that word BBI in that document. Maybe Rosaline can confirm that. They start by defining that document as bridges to a united Kenya. So hii ingine yenye mnasema tuna build haiko up. Anyway, so we can proceed. I think I can give Rosaline chance to respond to the concerns. Let's give Rosaline chance to respond to the concerns that were raised.
Can I make a comment before she responds?
Yes, you can go ahead.
Yes, sorry for coming back again. I didn't intend to, but I wanted to clarify one thing. We mentioned about the peaceful elections of 2002, and we can see, for those ones who are old enough like myself, we know why it happened. Number one, we had what we call the IPPG group, the IPPG, which was involved in formulating the engagement rules. That's number one. Then number two, as you keep saying that we have not taken a stand on the BBI, like the chairman and everyone has said, that's the truth. But remember, we have, as political parties, we have what we call the Political Parties Liaison Committee, that's the PPLC, which was not involved. How did we get the BBI? It was Jubilee and ODM. Since they could not agree, they decided that they are the political parties. You see, the problem we have in Kenya is an assumption that I am all of you. So the day when Jubilee and ODM could not agree, they said, now we want to come and build bridges. We have more than 60 parties in Kenya. You can even see how they picked the people who went to collect views. PPLC is not involved. CMD is not involved. Another party was not involved. They just went. Even we had the president talk about, akubaliana na mimi na yeye ndiye alinipea watu wake. So here we had a few people bring their watu wao to give us what they want, and they said, I am all of you. So the intention end of today's meeting, we'll understand the document from all of you. Then we, as Kenya National Congress, will come and make our statement. Because seriously, we are not as a party of a party. If you allow me, Bwana Chairman, I think I'm right to say that we are not as a party of a party, whereby two people come and then they decide they pick their friends. Others, like I can tell you, I don't know if you looked at the report, 2 signatures were alike. How do you have similar signatures? And that even the signatures, some other people are being signed for, it leaves a lot to be desired. That's what I wanted to say, so that even PPL and the political parties were not included. So basically, what we are discussing today is a proposal from two parties. Okay, so that we can also give our proposal. Thank you, and I yield back.
Lillian, before Nani comes in, Rosalind, can she also confirm that these proposals, as they are not very concerned, but they can just be passed by an act of parliament, by amending the acts of parliament? Lillian?
It's okay, Enoch, you can go ahead.
Yes, I was saying, as Rosalind comes on, can she also confirm to the membership that all the proposals that are in this BBI that affect political parties are not necessarily constitutional amendments, but amendments that can be done in the floor of the assembly through amending several acts that that deal on or deal with elections. Because I believe they are. Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Enoch. Thank you so much, SG. I think your sentiments are well noted, and Rosalind will include them as she does her summary. I want to give one more chance to Kevin Oduor. Kevin Oduor, if you have something to say, I saw you signaled me. Okay, if Kevin is not there, then Rosalind, I can take it back to you.
Thank you, Lillian. Thank you very much, everyone, for those comments. I think we've listened to Enoch and we've listened to Sonia and we've listened to Benjamin. And they raise all very, very valid issues. I'll start with Benjamin's comments about his views around the PPLC. If you look at the document, you will see that the PPLC presented its views, appeared before the steering committee on 14th of February and presented its views at PPLC. So maybe you need to be asking who was the PPLC who appeared and what did they say? So, because they could have been masqueraders. But indeed, the majority of these views cannot even be said to belong to Jubilee and ODM, because I don't even think as a political party, Jubilee supports half of these things or ODM supports this. I think they're the views of two individuals intent on creating a political pact and seats for themselves and their cronies. So I don't even think it's correct to say two political parties. When it comes to the issue of signatures, it reminds me to the fiasco brought around by Say, who said that the document was interfered with after they worked on it, and that this is not the document they produced. So again, it brings back the issue of legitimacy. What's the legitimacy of this document? How can we believe it if part of the members are disowning it? And those are part of the intolerances you see around the two proponents of this document, to other views or opposing views. And I think those are things we can flag out and continue to have discussions upon. Enoch, in your last question, you're asking whether we need a referendum to undertake this. Now, we must be clear, there are statutory amendments which it's a parliamentary process and can be done without a referendum. But still, looking at the proposed constitutional amendments, not many of them would require a referendum process under the meaning of Article 255 of the Constitution. However, I could say this, that some of them have such deep ramifications that you would want Kenyans to have a say on it, especially the ones that redefine the composition of the National Assembly and Senate. I think those are areas where Kenyans would really want to have a big say. If the Constitution would allow Parliament to amend it without our inputs, but I think it would be very dangerous to allow Parliament to move with those constitutional amendments without hearing Kenyans on it. So then there are so many other retrogressive things there, like I said earlier. So no matter that they can do a parliamentary process, I think it is key to get Kenyans' voices on this. Otherwise, I think a lot of us will be running to court to strike out all amendments that will be proposed. And I think it will be a busy time for the courts and for, what's his name? This guy was always in court with the public issues, interest cases. I forgot his name.
Mtata.
Okiya Mtata, thank you. Thank you very much for filling in that gap. Asante, asante. So I agree with you. And on cover, you say that this is a building bridge to nowhere. Yeah, we may be going nowhere. So those are true. And you say a big no to the document. Sonia, you raise very interesting issues there. How effective is our constitution as at now, and what are we achieving? So I think what you're asking is, do we need to change the document? And that's what came up earlier, even from Benjamin, and the need to audit it before we move forward. Is there room to incorporate divergent views? There's a big claimer for this. Of course, we're being told there's no room for this, but I think as we continue to claim for it, they will yield and they will allow us to do something. So we must keep speaking, keep talking, and keep demanding the space. You make my day, Sonia, when you say, how can two people have a handshake and then it shakes the whole nation? I love that. And I also love your acronym for Building Barriers to Building Barriers Initiative. I think that's very witty and very interesting. What you raised that is of great concern and a lot of Kenyans are asking is, why would we have funds to cater for BBI and we do not have funds to cater for NHIF needs? Where are our priorities as a country? I think those are issues I will leave to your political party to discuss later and bring to the table for Kenyans, because I think it's a really sad day that our priorities are in the wrong place. So thank you all very, very much. I thank you for your time, your comments, And it's been a very, very interesting conversation that I've had this afternoon. Asanteni sana. Thank you, CMD. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, SG. And thank you, Linian, for moderating. Asanteni.
Thank you so much, Roslyn. We appreciate the professional input. We also appreciate that you seem to be agreeing with many of these important concerns. That tells us that there are issues that ought to be discussed further. Maybe CMD will get as a better platform to even tell those who are concerned that these issues are not, that document ought to be opened. If we can open the most supreme organ in the country, why not a report? Thank you so much, Roslyn. We don't take it for granted that you found time to help us to digest this. So Isaac Kinyua, please express and relay our appreciation to CMD as an institution. As a party, KNC, we highly appreciate this chance. It's an honor to bring us together to discuss these fundamental issues. Most of them are discussed just in the corridors, but when we get this professional input, then we don't take it for granted. Asante sana, Isaac. I take it back to you so that you can help us to close.
Thank you so much, Lillian, for the good moderation. Thank you so much, Roslyn, for enabling the members of the Kenya National Congress to have a deeper look on the BBI document. So much the idea from CMD that we have been in a position to have a discussion in leadership of the Kenya National Congress. And these are, I believe that here from CMD to going forward, it is a push more important from the Kenyans can get their way into the BBI. We believe going to take up the opportunity and some of the reforms that are specifically touching up at least they are in a position to have concerns. If I thought this we did at least will have a referendum, every Kenyan will be in a position to informed decisions. From Kenya, say thank you, we appreciate, and from us, giving opportunities to continue having a conversation in the last that will be. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Kwaherini.
Thank you.
Isaac, tupatane nyuma ya tent.
Sawa sawa, nitakuona hapo kando.
Asante sana, members, for coming. Thank you so much for your time.
Asanteni, we can now live on our own pleasure.
No, before you leave, before members leave, let's appreciate our chairman. Yes, let's appreciate our chairman for taking time and kindly